I was standing at the kitchen counter making my morning coffee when my wife turned to me and said the words that would change everything. "I need some space. Can you stay at your brother's place for a few days?" I looked at her, confused. We'd been married for 38 years. We didn't do separation. We talked things through. Space? Helen, what are you talking about? We've barely said 2 words to each other all week, and now you want space? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Just kept wiping down the counter that was already clean. "I just need time to think. Please, Robert, don't make this harder than it is." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers. But the way she stood there, her shoulders tight, her jaw set in that way that meant her mind was made up, I knew I wouldn't get anywhere. Not right then. So I packed a bag, threw in some clothes, my medications, my reading glasses. The whole time, she stayed in the kitchen. Didn't come upstairs. Didn't say goodbye when I walked out the door. My brother Frank lives 20 minutes away in Riverside. He'd lost his wife to cancer 2 years back, so he had plenty of space. When I showed up on his doorstep with my overnight bag, he didn't ask questions. Just stepped aside and let me in. "Guest room's yours," he said. "Stay as long as you need." That was Tuesday morning. I tried calling Helen that afternoon. No answer. Tried again that evening. Voicemail. I left a message saying I hoped she was okay, that I was ready to talk whenever she was. Wednesday, I went to work like normal. I'm semi-retired now, just consulting 3 days a week for the engineering firm I used to run. Kept my phone on my desk all day, nothing from Helen. Wednesday night, Frank and I were watching the Dodgers game when my phone finally rang. But it wasn't Helen. It was my neighbor, Gerald Chen. And his voice was shaking. "Robert? Jesus Christ, Robert! Where are you?" I sat up straight. Gerald was a calm guy, retired physician. I'd never heard him sound like this. "I'm at Frank's place. What's wrong?" "There are police cars at your house. 3 of them. And an ambulance. I saw them carry someone out on a stretcher, but I couldn't see who. I tried calling Helen, but she's not answering, and I thought maybe you should know." The remote fell from my hand. Frank looked over, alarmed. "What? Who did they carry out?" "Gerald, what's happening?" "I don't know, buddy. But you need to get here. There's yellow tape across your driveway." I don't remember the drive home. Frank insisted on coming with me. I think I ran 2 red lights. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. When we turned onto Maple Street, I saw the lights first. Red and blue, flashing off every house on the block. Neighbors standing on their lawns in their pajamas even though it was past 11. I pulled up across the street. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across my driveway, across my front walkway, across my door. My door? My house? 38 years we'd lived there? A police officer approached as I got out of the car. Young guy, couldn't have been more than 30. "Sir, you need to stay back. This is an active crime scene. This is my house. I'm Robert Mitchell. I live here. Where's my wife?" His expression changed. He grabbed his radio. "Detective Harris. The homeowner just arrived." Everything after that is a blur of questions and lights, and neighbors staring and my heart pounding so hard I thought I might have a heart attack right there on my own lawn. A detective came out of my house. She was in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Mitchell? I'm Detective Sarah Harris. We need to talk." "Where's Helen? Where's my wife?" Gerald said someone was taken out on a stretcher. "Your wife is fine. She's at the station giving her statement." The person taken to the hospital was a male, approximately 65 years old. He sustained a gunshot wound to the chest. The world tilted. Frank grabbed my arm to steady me. "Gunshot? In my house? Who? Who was shot?" Detective Harris looked at me carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, when was the last time you spoke to your wife?" "Tuesday morning. She asked me to stay at my brother's for a few days." "Why? What does that have to do with anything? And you haven't been home since Tuesday morning?" "No. She wanted space. I was giving her space." "Detective, please, what the hell is going on?" She pulled out a notebook. "The man who was shot, does the name David Brennan mean anything to you?" "David Brennan. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That was Helen's boyfriend, from before we got married. I haven't heard that name in 40 years. According to your wife, Mr. Brennan showed up at your house tonight around 9 p.m. She says he forced his way inside. There was an altercation. She managed to get to the gun you keep in your bedroom closet. She shot him in self-defense. I couldn't process it. David Brennan, Helen's old boyfriend from college. The guy she'd dated for 2 years before she met me. The guy who'd gotten violent with her, who'd put her in the hospital once before she finally left him. What was he doing here? Why would he come to our house after all these years? That's what we're trying to determine. Mr. Mitchell, I need to ask you some questions. Do you own a firearm? Yes, a 9mm. It's registered. I keep it in a lockbox in my closet. When was the last time you saw it? I don't know. Months ago? I rarely even think about it. The questions kept coming. Where had I been? Could anyone verify my whereabouts? Did Helen and I have marital problems? Had I ever been violent with my wife? By 1 a.m, they finally let me into my house. Only I couldn't go upstairs. The bedroom was still being processed. There was blood on the carpet in the hallway. My hallway. Blood. Frank took me back to his place. I didn't sleep, just sat in his guest room staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it. Thursday morning, Detective Harris called. Helen was being held for questioning. They wanted me to come to the station. When I got there, they put me in a small room with coffee that tasted like motor oil. The detective sat across from me with a folder. Mr. Mitchell, I need to be straight with you. Your wife's story has some inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? She claims David Brennan forced his way into your home, but we found no signs of forced entry. The alarm wasn't triggered, and according to her statement, she knew he was coming. My mouth went dry. What? She says he'd been calling her, that he'd reached out about 6 months ago, that he wanted to apologize for how he'd treated her all those years ago. 6 months ago. 6 months ago, Helen had started acting different. Quieter. More distant. I'd chalked it up to her sister's death, to getting older, to the normal ebb and flow of a long marriage. Are you saying she invited him to our house? Detective Harris opened the folder, pulled out printed pages. Phone records. These are calls between your wife's cell phone and a number registered to David Brennan. They go back 7 months. Dozens of calls, some lasting over an hour. I stared at the pages. Numbers and times and dates. February, March, April, May, June, July, August. All while I was at work. All while I was reading in my study. All while I was sleeping next to her. We also found text messages on her phone. Mr. Mitchell, I need to ask you directly. Did you know your wife was having an affair? The room spun. An affair? No. That's not possible. We've been married 38 years. The messages suggest otherwise. They're discussing meeting up, making plans for when you're out of town. There's talk about leaving their spouses, starting over. I thought I might vomit. Mr. Brennan was married? Divorced. 3 times, actually. Most recently 2 years ago. Detective Harris slid another document across the table. This is where it gets complicated, Mr. Mitchell. We ran David Brennan's record. He has a history. 2 domestic violence arrests. 1 conviction. A restraining order from his second wife. Your wife knew all this. She'd lived through it herself 40 years ago. So she shot him in self-defense. Maybe. Or maybe they had a relationship that went wrong. Maybe he wanted to end it and she didn't. Maybe she panicked when you came home early from your brother's. Maybe this was never self-defense at all. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. You think Helen murdered him? I think your wife had been lying to you for months. I think she had a man in your house while you were away. I think when things went sideways, she grabbed a gun. What I don't know yet is whether David Brennan was the aggressor or if your wife is a very good actress. They released me an hour later, told me to stay available. Frank drove me back to his place because I couldn't go home. My house was still a crime scene. That afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer. Not my lawyer. Helen's lawyer. Mr. Mitchell, my name is Richard Torres. Your wife has retained my services. She wanted me to contact you directly. Is she okay? Can I see her? She's being held pending arraignment. The DA is considering charges ranging from voluntary manslaughter to second-degree murder, Mr. Mitchell. I need to ask you not to speak to the police anymore without legal representation yourself. Why would I need a lawyer? I didn't do anything. Because the DA is looking at every angle, including whether you knew about the affair and whether this might have been a murder-for-hire situation. I hung up, sat down on Frank's couch, stared at nothing. My wife of 38 years had been having an affair. My wife had shot a man in our home. My wife might go to prison for murder. And somehow, I was supposed to make sense of it all. That night, I finally got to talk to Helen. They let me see her for 15 minutes at the county jail. She sat behind plexiglass in an orange jumpsuit, and I almost didn't recognize her. Robert, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way. Find out what, Helen? That you were cheating on me? That you were sleeping with the man who put you in the hospital 40 years ago? Or that you shot him in our bedroom? She flinched. It wasn't like that. Then, what was it like? Explain it to me, because I'm trying to understand how my wife of nearly 4 decades could do this. He reached out last February, said he'd been in therapy, said he'd gotten sober, said he wanted to make amends for what he did to me all those years ago. And you believed him? At first, I just wanted closure. I wanted to hear him say he was sorry, that's all. But then we started talking, and he seemed different. He seemed like the boy I fell in love with before everything went wrong. So you started an affair. I didn't mean for it to happen. You and I, Robert, we'd been married so long. We were comfortable. We were routine. And suddenly here was this man making me feel young again, making me feel seen. I saw you every day. Did you? When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me about my day, my dreams, what I wanted? So this is my fault? No. God, no. This is my fault. All of it. But Robert, you have to believe me about what happened Tuesday night. He was supposed to come over for dinner. Just dinner. We were going to talk about what we wanted, whether there was actually a future for us. In my house. You were going to talk about a future with another man in the house I've paid for 38 years. I know how it sounds. But when he got there, he'd been drinking. I could smell it the minute he walked in. And he was different. Angry. He said he'd told his girlfriend about us and she'd left him. He blamed me, said I'd ruined his life. His girlfriend? I thought you two were together. Helen laughed bitterly. So did I. Turns out he'd been seeing someone else the whole time, playing us both. What happened then? He started yelling, getting aggressive, backing me into corners like he used to. I tried to leave, tried to go to a neighbor's house, but he grabbed me, pushed me against the wall. That's when I ran upstairs. I remembered the gun. I got to it before he got to me. And you shot him. He was coming at me, Robert, just like he used to. I saw that look in his eyes and I was 22 years old again, bleeding on my apartment floor. I wasn't going to let him hurt me again. I couldn't. She was crying now. Real tears? Hands shaking. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me he'd been contacting you? Because I was ashamed. Because I knew what it would mean. That I'd thrown away everything we built for a fantasy, for a man who was never going to change. The guard came to tell me time was up. Helen pressed her hand against the glass. Please don't give up on me. Please. I made terrible choices, but I'm not a murderer. I couldn't touch her hand. There was plexiglass between us. There was so much more than plexiglass between us. The trial took 8 months to start. 8 months of lawyers and depositions and forensic reports. 8 months of neighbors whispering. 8 months of sleeping in Frank's guest room because I couldn't bear to go home. They charged Helen with voluntary manslaughter. Her lawyer argued self-defense. The prosecution argued she'd lured David Brennan to the house with the intent to kill him because he'd threatened to tell me about the affair. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in that courtroom every single day. Listen to experts talk about blood spatter patterns and gunshot residue and the angle of the wound. Listen to Helen's lawyer paint David Brennan as an abusive monster. Listen to the prosecution paint my wife as a manipulative liar. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty. Voluntary manslaughter. 12 years. Eligible for parole in 8. Helen cried when they read the verdict. So did I. They took her away that same day. I didn't get to say goodbye properly. Just watched as they led her out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Frank tried to get me to come to dinner that night. I said no. Went back to his house, packed my bag, and finally went home. The house was clean. The police had released it months ago, and I'd hired a service to deal with the blood, the fingerprint dust, the evidence tags, but it still felt haunted. I walked through each room. The kitchen, where she'd told me to leave. The living room, where they'd talked and laughed while I was at Frank's. The stairs she'd run up while fleeing for her life, or running to get a gun to commit murder. I still didn't know which version was true. The bedroom was the hardest. I'd had the carpet replaced, but I could still see it. The spot where he'd fallen. The spot where my marriage had bled out along with David Brennan. I sold the house 6 months later. Couldn't live there anymore. Bought a small condo downtown. Started over. Helen wrote to me from prison. At first, I didn't open the letters. Just stacked them on my kitchen counter. Unopened envelopes piling up like accusations. But after a year, I opened one. It was 5 pages long, front and back. Her handwriting, the same handwriting I'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards for 38 years. She wrote about prison. About her cellmate, who was 24 and reminded her of our daughter. About the classes she was taking, the therapy groups. About how she'd finally started to understand why she'd done what she did. She wrote about her childhood. Her father, who'd been distant and critical. Her first boyfriend in high school who'd cheated on her. David Brennan, who'd made her feel special until he'd made her feel worthless. And me. Undecided, when Santerheated Hammond. How she'd loved me because I was safe, stable, kind, but how safe and stable had eventually started to feel like boring and invisible. She wrote that she understood if I never forgave her, that she didn't forgive herself, that she'd destroyed the best thing in her life, chasing a fantasy that had nearly killed her twice. She asked me to visit. Said she had things she needed to say in person. Things she couldn't write. I didn't answer the letter. 3 years went by. I dated a little. Women I met at the gym, through Frank's church group, at a book club I'd joined to fill the evenings. Nice women. Interesting women. None of them Helen. I hated that. Hated that after everything, I still missed her. Missed the way she'd hum while making breakfast. Missed her laugh. Missed the life we'd built even if parts of it had been a lie. Then I got a letter from Helen's lawyer. She was up for parole. Early, because of good behavior and overcrowding. The hearing was in 6 weeks. She wanted me to testify on her behalf. I threw the letter away. Then dug it out of the trash an hour later. Read it again. And again. Frank said I was crazy to even consider it. She cheated on you, Robert. She lied to you for months. She had that man in your house. In your bed. I don't know that for sure. I don't know what's true anymore. You know enough. Let her serve her time. Move on with your life. But I couldn't move on. Not completely. Because somewhere underneath all the anger and betrayal and hurt, there was still the woman I'd loved for 38 years. The woman who'd held my hand when my mother died. The woman who'd raised our children. The woman who'd been my partner for more than half my life. I made an appointment to visit her. First time in 3 years. She looked older, grayer, thinner. But when she saw me walk into the visiting room, her face lit up in a way I remembered from 40 years ago. From when we were young and everything was still possible. You came, she said. I came. We sat across from each other at a metal table. Guards watching. Other inmates and their families talking quietly around us. I wasn't sure you would. After I didn't hear back from any of my letters, I read them. All of them. I just didn't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted to see you. To thank you for considering the parole hearing. I haven't decided yet. She nodded. I understand. Robert, I need you to know something. What I told you that day through the glass, it was all true. David didn't come to my house for a romantic evening. He came to hurt me, and I shot him because I was terrified. But you lied about everything else? The affair, the phone calls, the plans you were making? I did. I lied because I was ashamed, because I'd convinced myself it was harmless, just talking to an old friend, until it wasn't harmless anymore. Until I'd crossed lines I never thought I'd cross. Did you sleep with him? She looked away. Twice. Both times at a hotel when you were out of town for consulting work. Both times I hated myself afterward. Why? Why would you throw away everything we had? Because I was scared, Robert. I was 62 years old and I looked in the mirror and saw my mother. I saw my grandmother. I saw all these women who'd lived their whole lives for their husbands and their children, and then woke up one day and realized they'd disappeared, that they didn't know who they were anymore. So you tried to find yourself by sleeping with your abusive ex-boyfriend? No. God, no. I tried to find myself by remembering who I'd been before I became your wife, before I became somebody's mother, and David represented that time. That girl who'd been young and reckless and made terrible choices but at least felt alive. And I made you feel dead? You made me feel safe. You gave me stability and kindness and a good life. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to keep choosing you. I forgot to keep falling in love with you. I took you for granted and I got bored and I looked for excitement in the worst possible place. If I testify at your hearing, what do you want me to say? The truth. Whatever truth you believe. If you think I murdered David, say that. If you think I defended myself, say that. I just want you to be honest. I've had 3 years to think about honesty and what it costs when you don't have it. Do you want to get back together? If you get parole, do you want to try again? She was quiet for a long time. Part of me does. Part of me dreams about going home with you, starting over, doing it right this time. But the truth is, I don't think we can. I broke something between us that can't be fixed. So why do you want me at the hearing? Because you're the only person who knows the whole story, the good years and the bad, the woman I was and the woman I became. And because even after everything, you're still the person I trust most in the world to tell the truth about me. The guard called time. Helen stood up, looked at me with eyes that held 40 years of history. I love you, Robert. I never stopped. Even when I was doing everything wrong, I loved you. I just forgot how to show it. Forgot how to be the person who deserved your love. I drove home in silence. Sat in my condo with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink. Thought about 38 years of marriage. About the good and the bad. About trust and betrayal and whether some broken things can ever be whole again. The parole hearing is next week. I still don't know if I'll testify. I don't know if I believe she's telling the truth about that night, or if she's just a convincing liar who's had 3 years to perfect her story. I don't know if David Brennan died because he was attacking her, or because she panicked and shot a man who was trying to leave. I don't know if the woman I loved for 38 years was ever real, or if she was always capable of this and I just didn't want to see it. What I do know is this. Marriage is long. Life is complicated. People make terrible choices for reasons that make sense to them at the time. And sometimes, the person you've shared your life with can become a stranger in an instant. I loved Helen. Part of me still does. Part of me probably always will. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes it's not even close. I have 6 days to decide what to tell that parole board. 6 days to figure out if the truth I believe in is the one where she's a victim who defended herself, or the one where she's a killer who threw everything away. 6 days to decide if I'm ready to let her go, or if I'm willing to try one more time to find the woman I married underneath all the lies. Frank thinks I'm a fool for even considering it. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am. But after 40 years together, don't I owe her at least the chance to make her case? Don't I owe myself the chance to finally get answers? Or maybe the real truth is that some questions don't have good answers. Some marriages don't have happy endings. And some crimes happen in that gray space, where victim and perpetrator blur together until you can't tell which is which. I look at the letter from her lawyer sitting on my kitchen counter. The hearing date circled in red. Next Tuesday. 10 a.m. County Courthouse. Room 4B. I'll be there. What I'll say when I get there, I still don't know. But I'll be there. Because after 38 years, I owe her that much. I owe us both that much. Even if the truth destroys whatever's left. Even if forgiveness isn't possible. Even if this is just the final chapter in a story that should have ended 3 years ago. I'll be there. And whatever happens after that, we'll both have to live with it. One way or another, this ends next Tuesday.